Hi, this is Precious Kendra, and I just want to say hello to all of my followers and subscribers. And I thought I would make a video about my testimony. Um, I have my ministry page and I have my channel here, but I've never really told you guys my testimony. So I thought I'd share that with you guys, and because part of my ministry is healing, and so I figured if I share my testimony and tell it to you guys and, allow people to hear it, then it'll help other people heal. Yeah, because I've been through a lot in my life, and I pray that this video is a blessing to you and your family and friends. Share it with whoever you want to share it with. Anybody who's been through any type of emotional trauma or any type of emotional bondage or anything like that. I've been through a lot of that, and I pray that this video will help you get through whatever it is you're facing. I'm going to share some of my testimony. My testimony is actually very long, but I'm going to minimize it and keep it short and sweet. Just give you guys the core details of my testimony. And with that, after I'm done sharing my story, I'm going to give you guys some pointers on how God has allowed me to go through the process of healing in my own life. And I pray you guys can use some of these tips. Okay, well, God bless you guys. I am so glad that you're tuning into this video. And I'm going to start at the very beginning. I guess, me being in my mother's womb is the best place to start of any. My mom actually ended up getting pregnant with me when she was a teenager. And my father actually gave her the money to get an abortion, after she told him that she was pregnant. My mother was still in high school and my father was in his early 20s. And my father wasn't the only one that pressured her into that. It was other family members as well. And so my mother took the money that my father gave her and actually ended up going to Planned Parenthood. But my mom shared with me later that she had an encounter with a woman that was standing right outside of Planned Parenthood. I don't know if she was a Catholic or if she was a Christian, but she ended up saying a few words to my mom, saying things like, no, don't do that to your baby, value your baby and all that good stuff. But my mother ended up going into Planned Parenthood anyway, and for some apparent reason, they were unable to schedule her an appointment. So my mom left and never went back. And she used the money that my father gave her for other needs. And so my mother ended up sparing my life. And I believe more than anything that was God, that she wasn't able to get an appointment or anything like that, and that she had that encounter with that woman. And I thank God for that. And so I was born November 24th, 1983 on Thanksgiving Day. My mother told me that she went into labor while she and my relatives were cooking Thanksgiving dinner. And normally Thanksgiving is usually pretty big in our family. We cook a lot of food: turkey, ham, macaroni and cheese, collard greens, all the works. And my mom went into labor. And so I guess you could say I'm a turkey baby because I was born on Thanksgiving Day. And so my birthday falls on Thanksgiving every 4 years. And so at a young age, I felt like, I was thrust into maturity and I was thrust into a lot of heavy responsibility because I was the oldest child. And if you are the oldest child in your household, then maybe you can relate to me. It just seems like a lot of pressure is placed on you to become this role model, to become this second parent to your younger siblings. And that's what happened to me. Shortly after I was born, my mother and father ended up going their separate ways. And so my mom was a single parent for a little while. And then she ended up in her first marriage to another man. And my mother actually ended up in two abusive marriages when I was younger. And the first one, um, this man was very physically abusive. He beat my mother severely. And I don't remember this, but my mom told me that I got struck in the face by this man, when I was little. I don't remember that, thank God. But that made my mother furious. But then he ended up beating her severely. And my brother, who's right under me, ended up coming out of that marriage. And then that marriage ended, I want to say after about a few years. And so my mom was a single parent, and I want to say I was about 6 years old, when we moved into our own little place. It was my mom, my brother, and I. And my mom was a single parent, therefore she had to work, and we didn't have a babysitter. So I want to say about the age of 6 was when I started caring for my younger brother. At the age of 6, I learned how to change my first diaper at the age of 6. And for those of you that don't know, I'm a high functioning autistic. I have a separate video here on my channel about my struggles with autism that's going to be included in a documentary that my mother's putting together. And I'll give you all the details about that when it comes time. But I'm really excited about that, because my mother's goal with this documentary is to raise awareness about autism. But if you guys want to see the video that I made, it's on this channel. And anyway, a lot of the signs of autism were there when I was a child, but I wasn't able to get the care and support that I needed. And the sad thing about it is autism tends to be easier to spot in boys than in girls. So when my mother tried reaching out for help when I was younger about the autism, a lot of people just brushed me off, so I wasn't able to get the support that I needed. And so I was bullied a lot as a result of that, among other things. So my childhood was, full of heartbreak, as you can say. There were some good memories, but, there were a lot of bad memories in my childhood because of everything that I faced. And anyway, I was talking about, at the age of 6, how I learned how to change my first diaper, and, how and it was just me and my younger brother. We were at home by ourselves. We lived in this small apartment building, but, I was smart enough to know to go to a neighbor if anything was wrong. We knew the neighbors that lived next door to us in the building, so if anything went wrong, all I had to do was go knock on their door and they would come over. So I spent a lot of time, taking care of my brother. Because my mom, like I said, my mom was a single parent and she had to work. So, she had to provide food and all that good stuff. Because, our fathers weren't around necessarily. And were they paying child support, I'm not sure. But they weren't around. And my father lived in Kentucky with his new wife and her son. And I lived in Ohio with my mom, so I rarely got to see my dad. And then I want to say about a year later, at the age, almost 2 years later, at the age of 7 going on 8, was when I lost my father to multiple sclerosis. I didn't get to spend a lot of time with my dad as it was, but I lost him at a very young age, but but I hold on to the memories that I do have of him. Yeah. In a future video, maybe I can show you guys a picture of him because I can't find it right now, unfortunately. But um, we actually look a lot alike. But my father died of multiple sclerosis. He made his living as a performer, and that and he was in San Francisco at the time. And he ended up trying to call for help in his hotel room, but the paramedics didn't get to him in time, and he ended up having some tumors in his chest that crushed his heart. So, but the good news is that my father was a believer. He was a Christian, and I believe that he is in heaven being comforted by my heavenly Father. And so, but that was a very confusing and painful time for me as a 7-year-old, to not have my dad around anymore. And so my mother was the one who broke the news to me, and we ended up going to his funeral the day after she told me that he had passed away. And I could still see the flood of tears, that was in that room. We were in a funeral home, and I remember my father was lying in this light blue casket, and I walked up to him, and I looked at him, and I actually ended up writing him a letter. My mom came up with the idea of me writing him a letter, and I put it in his casket. And I did it the best way I knew how. I was a second grader at the time, so I wrote the letter the best way I knew how, expressing my love for him. And we ended up putting it in the casket. And the viewing took place first, and then they actually ended up closing the casket for the service afterwards. And I could still see the flood of tears that were pouring out of everybody in that room. There wasn't a dry eye in the room, especially for my grandmother, because that was her son. There was a lot of tears flooding out of her eyes, and she was very, very heartbroken, which is understandable because a parent is not supposed to bury their child. And so I ended up getting through the funeral, but it ended up traumatizing me. I avoided funerals at all costs after that because, just seeing my father lying in a casket caused a lot of trauma in me, and I didn't even get any sleep that night. And so, that was something that God had to work on me, as far as fear was concerned, not looking at a dead body. Yeah, so like I said, I hold on to the memories that I do have of my father. I don't have many, I still have some pictures of him and all that good stuff, but with him dying, I didn't grow up with a good father figure in my life. God was my only father. That's how I looked at it. He was my only father. And so my mother's first marriage ended up falling apart, and my mom, my brother, and I were living in an apartment, and then we moved to another 2-family house the following year when I had turned 8. And shortly after my father's death was when I was inappropriately touched by a neighbor's uncle. And you see, there was another family that lived upstairs from us, and it was also a single mother, and she had 2 children, and sometimes my brother and I would go upstairs and play with her children. And on one particular day, I was upstairs in their apartment, and their uncle came over, and he just started doing all these inappropriate things towards me, and then he touched me inappropriately. And one of the kids in that family advised me not to say anything because he would get upset if I did. And so I didn't say anything to anybody, not even my mom. But eventually the truth ended up coming out, and from what I understood, he ended up facing charges for what he did to me. I'm not sure, 100% sure if that's true, but you know, that was a violation. He did violate me. And so, after that happened, I had absolutely no respect for men whatsoever. Honestly, you know, when I was growing up, dad was always looked at as the bad guy. So, I had this fear of men, and I had absolutely no respect for them. And then my mother ended up getting into her second marriage, I want to say a couple of years later. And he was also very verbally and physically abusive. And they, even though they were together longer, but my brother, who's right under me, he ended up getting the brunt of my the abuse of my mother's second husband. And Child Protective Services ended up getting called to our house about at least 2 or 3 times because of it. And for me, towards me, it was more verbal abuse. And then I remember him being physical toward my mom once. And then they would argue all the time. And I could say that I honestly hated him. I hated him because of the way he treated the family, and two other children ended up coming out of that marriage. I have 2 other siblings that ended up coming out of that marriage. And so, and what made matters worse was, I felt like a punching bag. I felt like everybody's punching bag. I felt like, if somebody was having a bad day, or if there was any type of frustration that anybody had or faced, then I was the one who got blamed for it, or I was the one who had the finger pointed at, only because I was the oldest child. And, and that caused me to go into a deep depression. And, and there were times when I would throw things around in my room or take my frustration out on my younger siblings. Yeah, and worst of all, I felt like I didn't have a voice. I had absolutely no voice. You know, I wasn't allowed to speak. And it's very important that you have a voice, that you allow your children to have a voice. Yeah, they need to know that they can have a voice. I mean, I'm not saying allow them to disrespect you, but they do need to have a voice, and they do need to be heard. Otherwise, all of that pain, all of that frustration, is going to build up in them, and then it's going to affect their future. Just like it affected my future. Yeah, because hurt people hurt people. Yeah, because if you're hurting, guess what? You're going to end up taking that pain and frustration out on somebody else. It's so true. It's this continuous cycle that goes around and around and around unless it's broken. And so I ended up taking a lot of my frustration out on my younger siblings. And then at home it was hell, and then at school it was hell as well because of all the bullying I was enduring. You know, I endured bullying because, one, because of my autism, two, because I didn't stand up for myself. I was too scared to stand up for myself. And three was because of my appearance. I got called ugly. I got called fat. There were times when I had to go to school with a broken backpack or, holes in my clothes because I felt like my needs were being ignored. There was a lot that I had to face. I had to go to school to hell, and then I had to come home to hell. And, and the bullying not only came from the students, it came from teachers. I felt like they were reluctant to get involved to help, or, they were part of the bullying. Not just in school, I endured bullying from these so-called friends, people that, they pretended like they were your friend, but really they were making fun of you or talking about you behind your back. And family members, unfortunately, I felt the bullying and the rejection from them as well. and sadly, even in the church, even though I grew up in church, I felt a lot of rejection and, pain from members of the church. And I know it hurts, you know, especially coming from the church, it hurts, because the church is supposed to be, you know, the place where, you're supposed to feel loved and accepted. But unfortunately, there were times when I felt rejected in the church. Rejection played a major part in my life. I made a lot of decisions, because of rejection, bad decisions because of rejection. I isolated myself at times because of rejection. Rejection is a powerful thing. It makes it very hard to trust people and it makes you paranoid. That's what rejection does. And, it's very painful to deal with on a daily basis. And it's very vital that you allow God to heal you, and take you through the process of healing, from things of the past. And I didn't realize it as a child, but, parents aren't perfect either. They make mistakes as well. And sometimes they don't deal with their own pain and they end up taking their own pain out on their children. The pain that may have been inflicted on them, they end up taking their own pain out on their children. And then it affects the children, and then the children have children, and then the children end up abusing their own children. It's like I said, it's just this continuous cycle, unless it's broken. And soul wounds, I call them soul wounds. They're called soul wounds, things from the past that have affected your soul. They will affect and contaminate your future if you let them. You have to deal with them head on, and allow God to take you through that process of healing. And when I entered into my early 20s, I went through this really bad period of moderate depression. I tried going to therapy. I tried going on antidepressants, and but it didn't really help much. Yeah, all the antidepressants gave me were bad side effects. I would have these crying spells at night. I would, not be able to sleep. I would toss and turn. It would be like a radio dial. Somebody turned the radio dial up in my head, and it would jump from one negative thought to the next. And I had thoughts of suicide. I never attempted suicide, but I had thoughts of suicide. I really did not want to live. I thought things would be better off and everybody would be better off if I died. Yeah, because I thought I was a burden to other people. And I didn't love myself at all. Yeah, I thought I was a mistake from the very beginning. Of course, my mom had me when she was a teenager, so I thought it was a mistake anyway. But then as the years went by, I kept thinking, why am I even here? What's the purpose of me being in this world when everybody hates me? That's how I felt. And so I went through this really bad period of moderate depression. I tried self-help programs, I tried therapy, I tried medications, and none of it seemed to really help much. It just seemed to make me worse. And so I tried to find other ways to cope with my depression. And what were some of those ways I used? Well, I never got into drugs and alcohol, but, food was a major thing for me. A lot of food consumption. I would eat and eat and eat. Yeah, I found comfort in food. And so, I would eat a lot, I would gain a lot of weight because I was so depressed. And another thing I used to cope with was excessive amounts of television. I would watch television, kind of just spend all day watching television and not doing anything productive. Useless television, Like, for instance, I was really heavy into horror movies and, and horror shows, things like that when I was a kid. We had Goosebumps, we had Are You Afraid of the Dark on Nickelodeon, you know, um, Tales from the Crypt. I used to be heavy into all of that stuff, because I found it fascinating and interesting. But, where does that influence come from? Honestly, where does it come from? It comes from the enemy. Yeah, all that horror movies, those horror movies that you see, the witchcraft and all that stuff, that stuff comes from the enemy. You know, people look at it as just entertainment, but it's not. That stuff can actually get into your spirit and contaminate it. And and what's another thing I like to watch was, when I was a kid, it was talk shows, but now we have all these reality shows on TV now. Why? Because people find drama entertaining, sadly. Yeah. You ever notice when you were in high school, or you see these teen flicks, they exaggerate a little bit but not by much. But the popular kids were the mean kids. The kids that always caused trouble, the kids that always stirred up drama, the kids that were always talking about everybody. They were the ones that everybody drew to. Why? Because, people found drama entertaining. Kids find drama entertaining, and so do adults. That's why these talk shows and reality shows are so popular, because people find drama as entertaining, unfortunately. And I used to watch that stuff too. When I was younger, it was Maury, it was Jenny Jones, it was Ricky Lake, um, Steve Wilkos. I used to watch all that stuff. Yeah, but then I stopped because as I've grown spiritually, especially, that stuff doesn't entertain me anymore. It just makes me heartbroken, and it makes me angry. I can't watch that stuff anymore. And as you grow spiritually, there are certain things that you're going to want to cut out of your life. Yeah, and that's what happened to me. And anyway, another thing I would watch was, unfortunately, was pornography. I would watch pornographic movies. I would watch pornographic videos online, and things like that. And if you look at YouTube especially, or, you do your little research online, there's a lot of sexual fetishes out there, unfortunately, that people find entertaining, and give them pleasure. There's a lot of sexual fetishes out there that people are turning to give themselves pleasure, and it's sad. So, those were, excessive amounts of television, food, those were things that I used to cope with, with depression, um, walking around with unforgiveness, I would just, say all these, to make myself feel better, I would say all these negative things about people, think all these negative things about people in my head, to make myself feel better, especially people that hurt me. I would make, myself feel better by thinking something negative about them, or pointing out their sins, things like that. But, that's not the way to cope with your pain. Yeah, wishing somebody else harm is not a way of coping with your pain. It really is not. And so those were the wrong ways that I coped with my depression and my anxiety, and everything that I faced, and the thoughts of suicide and all that stuff. you know I'll, I mean, for me it was pointless. I'm like, why am I here? Lord, why am I here? Why did you put me on this earth? Everybody hates me. I have no friends. My family hates me. you know Even the people inside the church hate me. I'm like, God, why am I here? I just take me to heaven now. You know, take me to heaven now. I don't want to be here anymore. That's how I felt. And so, you know, I did what I could, to try to ease that pain. And I don't care what you do. You can use drugs, you can use alcohol, food, whatever. You can cut yourself, harm yourself in any type of way. But that will not make the pain go away. It might block the pain for a little bit, but, hurting yourself or, using any type of substance, to block that pain or any type of worldly pleasure, it's not going to last long. It might block the pain for an instant, but then the pain is just going to come right back in an instant. So, the best way to deal with your pain is to go before God, and allow Him to take you through that process of healing. And in my mid-20s, the depression, started to get worse because, I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. I had graduated high school, but, I didn't, I tried getting through college, but it was extremely hard because of finances. Finances were low, and, I had no idea how I was going to get through life, and I wanted something more. I really wanted something more for my life. I didn't want to work at some dead-end job for the rest of my life. That just wasn't me. I was passionate about doing something more. And so I ended up talking to one of the ladies at my church, and she said, and she ended up giving me books and, other type of sources, to help me decide, what I should be doing with my life. And so I decided to go to culinary school because I figured maybe I should be a chef and, open up my own restaurant. Maybe that would give me some sort of happiness. But I tried going through culinary school, but deep down, I knew that culinary school was not for me. I just literally felt the Holy Spirit nudging at, just nudging at my soul, nudging at my heart, that, full-time ministry was what I should be doing. But, I was like, I kept thinking in my head, what if this doesn't work out? Maybe I should have something to fall back on, in case full-time ministry doesn't work out. So I didn't quit culinary school right away. But it was the year 2010 when I decided to go to a very special conference in Columbus, Ohio called Dominion Camp Meeting. And that's with World Harvest Church and Pastor Rob Parsley. I found out that one of my favorite ministers was going to be there, and Pastor Benny Hinn, I'm sure you guys are familiar with him. He was actually going to be there that year to minister at Dominion Camp Meeting. And the World Harvest Church ends up having this conference every year in the summer. And I had never heard of World Harvest Church, never heard of Pastor Rob Parsley or anything like that. And so I decided to give it a try, and we were on break at school anyway, a summer break, a 3-week summer break, and I decided I wanted to do something instead of sitting around the house. And so I thought about going to an amusement park, spending a weekend at an amusement park, but then I heard about this conference, and I felt the Holy Spirit leading me more in that direction. So I said, okay, I can go to an amusement park anytime. I'm going to go to this conference and have a good time. And so I went. The church was huge, which was a shock for me. I went. I had a good time. And the very first night that I went, there was this advertisement on their screens for Valor Christian College, which is World Harvest Church's Bible College. And something in me just leaped, shall I say. And I was like, okay, so I wrote down the information, and I ended up talking to one of the people in the foyer that had applications, ended up taking an application. And I enjoyed the conference, went back home, and set the application aside. I was like, nah, maybe I should just continue with culinary school, like I said before, and just have something to fall back on just in case something like this wouldn't work out anyway. And so I ended up going back to culinary school. But one thing about the Holy Spirit, when he wants to get your attention, he will not leave you alone. Yeah, and he would not leave me alone about this ministry thing. So I was like, okay. So I ended up skipping class one night and ended up going to the library and filling out the application for this Bible college online. And wrote out my heartfelt testimony and all that good stuff, paid the $50 fee and all that good stuff. And um, and I ended up going to back to the church and going back to the school for a visit. They have what's called college days, where potential students could come and check out the school and see what it's all about. And so I ended up going to a college day event, and I knew right then and there that that was where I needed to be. I needed to be in that school because, God was opening up the door for me. And I ended up rededicating my life to Christ at the during that time when I was at college days, because my relationship with God was kind of going back and forth at that time. I first gave my life to Christ when I was 8 years old. At the first, remember one of the first churches I went to as a kid, I ended up giving my life to Christ at that church, and I loved to praise dance. I loved singing in the choir and all that stuff. I just enjoyed going to church. And then I ended up rededicating my life again when I was 16 at a Young Life camp that I went with at another church with a group of teenagers. But I really started getting serious about my walk with God when I was at this college days event in November 2010. And I ended up going to the altar and just surrendering my life. I was like, God, I'm all yours. Whatever you want me to do with my life, it's all in your hands. And I ended up getting accepted into Valor Christian College the following year, January 2011. And I was there for about 5 to 6 years, I want to say. And then I graduated once in 2014, and then I ended up staying for a second degree and ended up walking and graduating again in 2015. So I have 2 degrees from Valor Christian College, and that place literally shook me up and changed my life. Really brought me out of my comfort zone and helped me understand my full potential and helped me realize the gifts and talents that God had given me and what he wanted me to pursue in life. And I knew one of the things that I wanted to pursue in life was missions. Yeah, I really wanted to do missions and, healing and, and just arts. Yeah, because I'm very artistic. I love to sing, I love to dance, I love to write, all that good stuff. And so healing and arts, were 2 ministries that I felt like God was calling me to. And so I did my best to become more passionate and, just to pursue those areas. And one of the things I did was write and start a blog and started my own ministry page. As soon as I graduated, I started my own ministry page, and I started singing more, I started writing more, I started getting more into the arts. I started praying, for people. Yeah, I found myself praying for complete strangers on the street, people that needed prayer because, there's a world out there that's hurting, and there's a world out there that needs to know the love and the hope of Jesus Christ. And even if you pray for some random stranger on the street, You know, if they ask them if they need prayer, you know, ask them if, you know, they um, need to be hugged or anything like that. You know, there were times when I did that. And, you know, and people were blessed, you know, as a result of, you know, me praying for them, or, you know, just embracing them, you know, and letting them know how much Jesus loves them. And, you know, I really felt like I was called to be a mother of many nations, you know, be a mother to many, you know, especially those that are hurting, you know, those that have been motherless, you know, those that, you know, have never felt love before, you know. And because of my testimony and because of the things that I've been through, you know, I felt like God was using me to help others and to help heal others. You know, only He could heal them. Yeah, but He was using me as a vessel, you know, to help them, you know, understand that they were loved and they were accepted by the Most High. And so, shortly after I graduated from Valor Christian College, God gave me this dream about the state of Arizona, and it was then, while I was at Valor, that I realized that I was also a prophetic dreamer. Yes, so I know I'm rambling on and on about all these gifts, but you know, I didn't realize it at the time, but I'm a prophetic dreamer. And so God gave me Arizona in a dream when I was about, um, I want to say halfway toward graduation the second time. Um, he gives me Arizona in a dream. And I had never been to Arizona. I had never been out west. You know, I didn't know anybody out west. And I'm like, okay, God, you know, what's the deal with Arizona? But you know, I ended up moving to Arizona very quickly, right after I graduated from Valor the second time. And so, you know, I ended up getting a job. I ended up getting an apartment, you know, which was it was a really big step of faith when I moved to Arizona. And I was like, okay, God, I'm in Arizona, and I had my doubts too. You know, even with me moving there, I had my doubts. But then He ended up confirming it in the second dream, you know, about Arizona. I was like, okay, God, I know this is you. Okay, I'm going to stay in Arizona. And while I was in Arizona, you know, not only was God taking me through a process of healing, you know, He was also tugging on my heart for Native Americans. And I was like, wow. And so I ended up looking up Native American ministries. While I was in Arizona, I was looking up Native American ministries. And so I was like, okay, so I emailed a couple of different places, and a few of them actually ended up getting back to me when I emailed them. And currently, I am living and working at a home that houses Native American children that are in the foster care system called Naomi House. And I came here in December 2017 was when I came here, you know, and I'm being a mother to many, you know, like I'm called to be. And, you know, and these kids, you know, they have a lot of challenges. They've been through a lot of trauma. You know, abuse happens on Native American land, you know, and alcoholism and drug use, you know, happens on Native American land quite often, you know, at a very alarming rate, probably more than any other culture. Because, you know, there's a lot of hatred, there's a lot of depression, you know, there's a lot of oppression over the reservations, you know, because of, you know, they've been dominated, they've been ostracized, you know, there's a lot that occurs on Native American reservations, you know, as a result of everything that they've been through. And these children come out of a lot of bad situations. and we do our best to love them and to care for them, and and to supply their needs, so they can be placed in good placement, or be returned back to their families, in good condition. And sometimes, they stay here for years because, they have no relatives that are reliable to take them, and they stay here until they turn 18. So, foster care is just like this continuous cycle on Native American reservations. And so, and I just feel blessed that God is using me to embrace these children, and let them know that they are loved and they are wanted, you know, and the things that happen to them were not their faults. Just like, the things that happened to you were not your fault, was not your fault. Okay, the things that happened to me was not my fault. Yep. And if you allow God to do it for you, He will take you through that pain, and help you heal from that pain and heal your soul wounds, and and help you get through, the pain of your past. And quickly, I just want to share some things that helped me get through, um, things that God has used to help me heal from my own soul wounds. And the first thing I have down here is forgiveness. Yeah, you have to forgive those that have hurt you, and you have to forgive yourself, for the mistakes that you made. Yeah, for the Bible says all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. We've all messed up. We've all made mistakes, and hurt people hurt people. Yeah, like, you may have been hurt by your parents, and most likely it was because they've been hurt themselves, and they never healed from that pain that they went through because of their parents. Like I said, it's just a cycle, yeah, that has to be broken. And one of the things to break that cycle is forgiveness. You have to forgive people. Forgiveness is not a feeling, it's a choice. So Jesus forgave you when He went to the cross. Therefore, it's our responsibility to forgive others that have hurt us, you know. And you have to forgive yourself, for the mistakes that you made as well. Okay, number two I have here, this may sound silly, but cry. Cry, cry, cry. Yeah, it's okay to cry. Ladies, it's okay to cry. Men, it's okay to cry. Yeah, let those feelings out, Tears cleanse the soul. They really do. Tears cleanse the soul. You know, if you feel like you have to cry, cry. Cry sometimes. We all go through sadness. We all go through pain. We all go through struggle, and sometimes we have to cry, to let that pain out. So cry, cry, cry. Don't be ashamed to cry. Okay, if you don't want to cry around other people, cry in private. Or, if you're talking to someone and you start crying, don't be ashamed. You know, and hopefully you're talking to a person that's not ashamed of you crying around them. Okay, so cry, cry, cry. Okay? Number three, what I have here is prayer. Oh yeah, time with God is essential to healing. Prayer, talking to Him. God loves it when we talk to Him. He loves it when we express our pain and our feelings, and He loves it when we're honest with Him. Tell God how you're feeling, be honest with God. Lord, this is how I feel. I'm tired. I'm tired of living, Lord. I'm tired of living this way, Lord. I'm tired of this. I'm tired of that. Be honest with God. Pray. Prayer is very essential in our relationship with God. And another thing I have down here is counseling. Talk to someone you can trust, like your pastor, or, a very close friend, or a counselor that you can trust, somebody that you can trust, with your most personal and deep issues. Talk to somebody about what you're going through. Yeah, you need support around you. You're never alone. Okay, don't ever think that you're alone in your struggles, because you're not. Okay, pray, 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 and talk to someone about what you're feeling. Okay. And another thing I have down here is worship. Oh, wow. I can't tell you how much I love to worship. I love listening to worship songs. Especially when I could be having the worst day and I listen to some worship and, and it calms me down. It gives me hope. It gives me peace, peace that surpasses all understanding. You never know how much worship can affect you. Yeah, worship, worship, worship. Yeah, I love to worship. Okay. And here on my channel, I have a lot of playlists. But you'll see a lot of my favorite worship songs. I like a lot of the contemporary stuff that's out today, but I also like a lot of the old stuff. Like a lot of old hymns and things like that. And classical, classical Christian music and stuff like that. I like the old as well as the new. So, if you want, you can check out my playlist here on my channel. Okay, and the last thing I have here is journaling. Okay, I find journaling a lot really, really helpful. Okay, if you don't have anybody to talk to, or if you don't want to say things out loud and these negative thoughts are coming um, into effect, or they're coming into your mind, write them down. Okay, write stuff down. Yeah, it will help. If you don't want to talk about it, write it down. Okay, because it will help. Getting all that stuff out. Getting it out. Don't hold it in, because holding it in only causes, more trauma, more turmoil in your life. You have to let those feelings out. Let them out. Don't be ashamed to let them out. Yeah. You have to let those feelings out. You know, when it comes to standing up for yourself, be assertive. Pull somebody aside. If somebody's done something to offend you or wound you, pull that person aside privately, just like it says in the book of Matthew. If a brother sins against you, go to him, but do it privately, just between the two of you. But if that person doesn't hear you, then you bring one or two witnesses into the equation. Yeah, but do your best if there's an issue to keep everybody else out of it. Don't talk about them behind their back. Pull them aside and be assertive with them and say, hey, this was not cool, da 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 da. And then you guys can come to a solution yourselves. But if that doesn't work out, then bring one or two witnesses in, to help them understand what you're trying to say. Okay? But whatever you do, don't talk about people behind their backs. Okay, I've had that happen to me one too many times, and I know how painful it feels. Yep. An ounce of gossip is worth a pound of trouble. Okay, so avoid gossiping. Okay? Well, that is all I have for today. Maybe I'll make some more future videos, but I hope that my testimony, the snippet of my testimony, like I said, it's very long, so this is only a snippet of it. But I pray that this blesses you, and I pray that my advice on healing will help you cope with whatever that you're facing, or whatever soul wounds that you're dealing with in your life. And you can leave a comment below. If you want me to pray for you, I will. The Cherishable Heart is my ministry page on Facebook, The Cherishable Heart, or you can always just subscribe to my YouTube channel. And I'll keep you updated on certain things, like the documentary my mom's making and all that good stuff. Okay, well, God bless you guys, and have a good day. Okay, peace, Jesus, and shalom. Bye-bye.